wake each day into a world that does not ask for your permission. Noise surrounds you. Expectations press in. Thoughts arrive uninvited, dragging fear from the past and anxiety about the future. You may believe these feelings are happening to you, but they are happening within you, shaped by the judgments you silently accept. Understand this first. Nothing outside your mind has the authority to disturb your inner peace unless you grant it that power, not the words of others, not loss, not uncertainty. The disturbance is not in the event itself, but in the meaning you attach to it. And meaning, unlike events, is always within your control. When anger rises, it is because you have decided something should not be as it is. When fear tightens your chest, it is because you have imagined a future that has not yet arrived. When anxiety lingers, it is because your attention has wandered away from the present moment, the only place where strength exists. There is a rule, simple in words yet demanding in practice, that restores order to the mind. It asks you to pause, to separate what is yours to command from what is not, to withdraw your energy from needless suffering and return it to reason. Practice daily, this rule quiets the noise, steadies the heart, and reminds you that you were not made to be ruled by fleeting thoughts. If you learn to govern your mind, you will find that fear loses its voice, anger exhausts itself, and anxiety dissolves under the light of clarity. What remains is calm resolve, a state not given by fortune, but earned through discipline. And that is where true freedom begins. The mind is the true battlefield, not the world outside. Most people spend their lives preparing for struggles that never truly threaten them, while leaving their inner world completely unguarded. They argue with others, fear circumstances, resent fate, and blame events, believing these are the sources of their suffering. Yet the real conflict is quieter and far more decisive. It happens in the space between a thought and your acceptance of it. Every fear that unsettles you, every wave of anger that overtakes you, every anxious spiral that drains your strength begins as a single judgment in the mind. Not the event itself, but your interpretation of it determines whether you stand firm or collapse inwardly. You may believe that the world attacks you relentlessly, but the world merely presents situations. It is your mind that chooses whether to see them as threats or challenges, as insults or irrelevancies, as disasters or passing moments. When the mind lacks discipline, it reacts automatically, like an untrained guard who panics at every sound. Thoughts rush in unchecked. Emotions follow without resistance, and soon the inner state becomes chaotic. In such a condition, even minor inconveniences feel unbearable, and imagined dangers feel real enough to wound you deeply. This is why mastering the outer world, without mastering the inner, one never brings peace. You can gain status, security, and recognition, yet still be tormented by restlessness and fear. You can remove obstacles, yet create suffering through expectation and comparison. The mind, when left unattended, turns even comfort into discomfort, and turns abundance into anxiety. It is capable of inventing problems where none exist and magnifying small troubles until they dominate your awareness. The battlefield of the mind demands vigilance, not force. You do not conquer it by suppressing thoughts or fleeing emotions, but by observing them clearly and refusing to surrender your judgment too quickly. Each time a fearful thought appears, you have a choice: to accept it as truth or to examine it calmly. Each time anger stirs, you may either obey it or pause long enough to see whether it deserves your energy. This pause is where strength is forged. It is not dramatic nor visible to others, yet it determines the quality of your life. A disciplined mind does not eliminate hardship, but it prevents hardship from ruling you. It allows you to stand steady while circumstances shift, to remain composed while others react, and to act from reason rather than impulse. When you recognize that the real struggle is internal, you stop exhausting yourself fighting shadows in the external world and begin directing your effort where it has real power. Emotions do not rise from events themselves, but from the judgments we attach to them. This truth is difficult to accept because it removes the comfort of blame. It is easier to say that a person caused your anger, that a situation created your fear, or that uncertainty produced your anxiety. Yet if this were so, every individual facing the same event would feel the same emotion with equal intensity. They do not. One person remains calm where another panics. One feels insulted where another feels indifferent. The difference lies not in the event, but in the meaning each mind assigns to it. The mind constantly interprets what it encounters. It labels things as good or bad, safe or dangerous, acceptable or unbearable, often in an instant and without reflection. These judgments feel automatic, but they are learned habits shaped by past experiences, expectations, and unexamined beliefs. When the mind decides that something threatens your worth, your safety, or your sense of control, emotion follows immediately. Anger flares when you believe you have been wronged. Fear arises when you judge an outcome as harmful. Anxiety persists when you imagine loss before it arrives. None of these emotions appear without a prior verdict issued by the mind. Because judgments operate so quickly, they often go unnoticed. You feel the emotion first and assume it was inevitable. But if you slow down and observe closely, you will see that every emotional surge carries a silent sentence behind it. This should not be happening. I cannot handle this. This means something terrible. These thoughts, once accepted, give emotion its strength. Without them, emotion loses its grip and passes like a cloud across the sky. This understanding does not demand that you become cold or unfeeling. It asks only that you reclaim authorship over your inner life. You are not required to agree with every thought that enters your mind. You are allowed to question whether a judgment is true, useful, or necessary. When you interrupt a harsh interpretation and replace it with a measured one, the emotional response changes as well. What once triggered anger may now provoke reflection. What once caused fear may now invite preparation rather than panic. As this practice deepens, you begin to feel a quiet distance between yourself and your emotions. They still arise, but they no longer command you. You recognize them as signals shaped by interpretation, not as orders that must be obeyed. This distance brings clarity. It restores choice, and in that choice lies the power to remain steady, even when the world behaves unpredictably. Inner peace is not a mood that appears by chance, nor a reward granted when life becomes gentle. It is a discipline practiced quietly and repeatedly, often when it feels most difficult to do so. Many wait for calm conditions before seeking peace, believing it will arrive once problems are solved or circumstances improve. Yet life rarely offers such permission. Conditions shift, demands return, and new concerns replace the old. If peace depends on external order, it will always remain fragile. Discipline of the inner life begins with attention. What you allow your mind to dwell on determines the state you live in. When attention is scattered, constantly pulled toward irritation, fear, or desire, the mind grows restless. When attention is trained, guided deliberately toward what is within your control, stability emerges. This training is not rigid or harsh. It is steady, patient, and rooted in reason. Each moment becomes an opportunity to choose composure over reaction. True peace requires restraint, not the suppression of feeling, but the refusal to indulge every impulse that arises. Anger demands expression, fear demands escape, anxiety demands reassurance. Discipline answers none of these demands blindly. It pauses, evaluates, and responds only where response is warranted. In this restraint, the mind learns that it does not have to obey every internal command. Over time, impulses lose urgency. They still appear, but they no longer dominate. Discipline also involves acceptance, not resignation, but clear recognition of what lies beyond your command. You cannot control how others behave, how events unfold, or how fortune shifts. You can control your judgment, your effort, and your character. Peace grows when energy is withdrawn from what cannot be directed and invested fully in what can. This redirection is subtle yet powerful. It prevents wasted resistance and quiets unnecessary struggle. Practiced daily, this discipline reshapes the inner world. The mind becomes orderly, less reactive, and more resilient. Calm ceases to feel rare or accidental and begins to feel familiar. Not because life has softened, but because your response has matured. You no longer measure peace by the absence of difficulty, but by the steadiness with which you meet it. Each choice to remain grounded strengthens this discipline, and with each repetition, peace becomes less of a hope and more of a habit. Fear, anger, and anxiety gain their strength from resistance and confusion, not from their own nature. When these emotions arise, most people either fight them blindly or surrender to them completely. Both reactions deepen their hold. But when an emotion is observed clearly, without panic and without judgment, it begins to weaken on its own. Observation introduces space, and in that space, the emotion is no longer absolute. It becomes something that happens, not something that rules. The moment you notice an emotion forming, you step out of automatic reaction. You are no longer identical with the feeling. You are the one witnessing it. Fear tightens the body, accelerates the breath, and fills the mind with imagined outcomes. Anger heats the chest, sharpens thoughts, and narrows perspective. Anxiety scatters attention, pulling it toward future possibilities that may never occur. When these sensations are seen plainly, without stories added to them, they lose much of their force. They are revealed as temporary states, not permanent truths. Clarity dissolves exaggeration. Emotions often feel overwhelming because they are fueled by assumptions and projections. Fear predicts catastrophe. Anger insists on injustice. Anxiety demands certainty where none is possible. Observation interrupts this process. You notice the thought attached to the emotion and recognize it as a thought, not a fact. This recognition alone loosens the grip. The body begins to settle, the breath steadies, and the urgency fades. What once felt unbearable becomes manageable simply because it is understood. This practice requires honesty rather than control. You do not tell yourself that fear should not exist, nor do you condemn anger for appearing. You allow the emotion to be present without feeding it. By doing so, you deny it the fuel of resistance and dramatization. Emotions thrive when they are either suppressed or indulged. They diminish when they are seen for what they are. Like waves, they rise, crest, and fall when left undisturbed. As this habit strengthens, you begin to trust your ability to remain present even when emotions arise. You no longer rush to escape discomfort or react impulsively. Instead, you remain still long enough to understand what is happening within you. This understanding restores balance. It reminds you that emotions are signals, not commands, and that awareness is stronger than any passing feeling. Through clear observation, the mind regains authority, and emotional storms lose their power to overwhelm. Mastery begins with choosing what deserves your attention, because attention is the gateway through which every thought and emotion enters your life. What you focus on repeatedly becomes familiar, and what becomes familiar begins to shape your character. Many give their attention away carelessly, allowing it to be seized by noise, conflict, comparison, and imagined threats. Over time, this constant exposure trains the mind to remain unsettled, always alert for problems and rarely at rest. Attention is not passive even when it feels that way. Each moment you dwell on resentment, you strengthen it. Each time you replay fear, you rehearse it. Each anxious forecast about the future conditions the mind to expect disturbance. This does not happen because you are weak, but because the mind follows what it is shown most often. Like a muscle, attention develops in the direction it is exercised. When it is scattered, the inner world becomes fragmented. When it is directed, clarity begins to form. Choosing where attention rests requires intention and restraint. You will not always control which thoughts arise, but you can decide which ones receive prolonged consideration. A thought may appear uninvited, but it does not need to be entertained. When you redirect attention away from what is harmful or unproductive, you reclaim energy that would otherwise be wasted. This redirection is not denial, it is discernment. It recognizes that not every thought deserves belief, and not every emotion deserves center stage. As this practice deepens, attention becomes steadier. You notice when it drifts toward comparison, regret, or anticipation, and you gently return it to what is present and real. This return is repeated many times, and each return strengthens discipline. Gradually, the mind learns where to rest. It becomes less reactive, less hungry for stimulation, and less vulnerable to disturbance. Calm is no longer forced. It emerges naturally from focus. What you attend to shapes how you experience the world. When attention is anchored in what you can influence, your actions, your values, your effort, you feel capable rather than overwhelmed. When it is anchored in what lies beyond your control, anxiety takes root. By choosing wisely, you protect the mind from needless strain. You give it a structure within which it can function clearly and steadily. Through this simple but demanding practice, attention becomes an instrument of mastery rather than a source of distraction.